Welcome to Pundit. No, not that one. No, No, not that one either. No, welcome to Basketbros. Tonight, I am the one that's leading the way on this one right here for some odd reason or other, but I'm giving this a shot. I'm not the producer, but I'm going to lead it off. I'm Jacob Christner, the Pundit's Pundit, and what from Pundit Views and about a billion other shows. And we're going to be going on tonight. We got a big show here on Basketbros. Tonight, first off, we have got Scott, the Motor City Mad Mouth, Morganroth.
Hello, Jacob Christner. I am loaded with Diet Mountain Dew, and I'm ready to do a lot of damage on the old hardwood.
Yes, and then the other legend of the other legend of the Midway, or however we want to say it, right there, George Eichorn.
Motor City, not Midway, but that's okay.
Okay,
Jacob.
The legend of the Motor City, yes.
Midway is your Chicago.
Yeah. Well, you can pick either way, It's like
I'm just teasing with you.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Good to be part of the show. Thanks.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm very glad to have you tonight. And what we're going to be doing is we are going to have ourselves a nice show. Got some really good topics going on with this. And if we have a very first one, which is right up your alley and right up your hearts, Jerry Sloan. Now, see, here's the big thing about this. Tonight, I'm kind of leading the way, so I'm not exactly Denzel when it comes to the hype machine, but I will do my best. What we have right here is Jerry Sloan, first as a player, then as a coach. He had 14 points a game in his career, about 11 seasons, I believe. 7.4 rebounds, 2.5 assists, two steals a game for about 4 or 5 straight years. So he had some hands also. That made it 10,571 points, 5,615 rebounds, and 1,925 assists. Come on, he could have stayed long to get to 2,000, right? Yes, as a coach, he also had 1,221 wins, 5 Western Conference Finals, 2 Finals appearances. 5 Western Conference Finals is pretty darn heavy. That's a pretty good career. Also, 2 NBA All-Stars, 4 All-NBA All-Defensive First Teams, which probably explains the steals. 2 NBA All-Defensive Second Teams. The number 4 is retired by the Bulls. 2 ICC Player of the Year awards, 63 and 65. 3-time First Team All-ICC, and the number 52 jersey retired by Evansville. And then as a coach, he's got the Chuck Daly Lifetime Achievement Award. He's one of the top 15 coaches in NBA history, and for some reason, the number 1,221 retired by the Jazz. That's if anybody was going to take it. And one thing I can say about Jerry Sloan, just the way he played. I looked at the way he played. You want to know what he reminds me of as a real-life version of? Ken Reeves from The White Shadow. If you get my point, what just the build. They were both about 6'5", 6'6", both a bit trim, both everything, both could play. And I'm just saying this is the fictional character, but both could play shooting guard, and both could play forward in both the levels. So basically, you just wonder if Ken Reeves was after Jerry Sloan a little bit. But at the same time, Jerry Sloan coached the Bulls for 4 years. I just have to wonder, with some of the bad coaches the Bulls had, I am shocked that he didn't stay longer until they got him, Jackson or whatever, or until he went to Utah, because they had the Stan Albeck, they had Kevin Lockery, a lot of failed experiments, and I mean until Doug Collins came around. So I'm wondering how come they didn't keep Jerry Sloan longer. But either way, George, tell me more about Jerry Sloan.
Well, Jerry Sloan, I go back to the days of Cobo Arena when the Detroit Pistons would play the Chicago Bulls. And let me tell you, he was one of the more despised players that the Pistons would face up against. Okay? You had the Bulls, and you had Love, and you had Chet Walker, and you had Boerwinkle, and you had Dick Motta as the head coach. And Jerry Sloan was tough as nails. Let me tell you, the Pistons did not look forward to playing him. He was an aggressive player. He made you work. The Pistons had a guy, and Scott will remember, a guy by the name of John Mengelt, which was not anywhere near as good as Jerry Sloan was in his career, but John was one of those tough as nails kind of guy that you had to go up against. And I'm talking about this rivalry started back in the days when Ray Scott was coach of the Detroit Pistons. and Dick Motta for the Bulls. And they had some great playoff series, Detroit and Chicago. And I know Scott's going to talk about this too, but I'll tell you what, that was a fun basketball time. And we're talking long time before Michael versus Isaiah and the rivalries, okay, which is another era. But this Detroit-Chicago era for a few years was simmering on a real hot level. Now we're talking 7-game series, Chicago and Detroit. But Jerry Sloan, Pistons did not look forward to playing against him at all. This guy was very, very good and a very good defender.
Oh, absolutely. And what do you say, Scott?
Well, what I say is the Pistons played the Bulls in a hard-nosed 7-game series televised by CBS. They had Butterbean Love on there and continue to name Norm Van Leer. Pat Summerall, believe it or not, Hot Rod Hundley were broadcasting this thing, and I believe Mendy Rudolph. So, back then you talk about broadcasters that went into other sports after football. Well, Pat Summerall preceded Brent Musburger is what they did. So, yeah, he was a hard-nosed player. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he have a very short stint as coach of the Chicago Bulls? I'm trying to find that out.
4 years.
Was it 4 years? Was it longer than that?
3 as a coach, 1 as assistant.
Okay. All right. So I thought he was a head coach a short time. So
no, he was 3 as a head coach and 1 as an assistant.
All right. Well, I thought it was shorter than 3 years, but nevertheless. Yeah. Okay. Well, I just want to set the record straight on that. No big deal. Nevertheless, he was a hard-nosed defensive player, not a great offensive guy, but you know what? He's, to me, who knows what his offensive stats would have been like in Patty Cake Becker's man basketball these days. But he's old school is what he is. And to me, he adapted to the times as a coach with the Utah Jazz because he obviously had a lot of great players. And if it weren't for Michael Jordan, who's to say the Jazz wouldn't have won 1 or 2 titles for sure with Stockton and Malone. But unfortunately, you run into certain icons at the wrong time, and that limits your ability to ever win a title. Ask Charles Barkley, too. Think of all the players that ran into mega superstars and rangless. So. Yeah. But that series, George, why don't we go back and educate the audience on that? What do you remember the most about that Pistons Bulls series, other than the fact that it went 7 games?
Well, I tell you what, Scott, and our audience, especially the Detroit folks that remember it, and Chicago folks as well. This series was, I think it put Detroit back on the map. Detroit had been struggling for several years, not making the playoffs. And Earl Lloyd hired Ray Scott, a former Piston player, as his assistant coach. Back then, can you believe it? They only had 1 assistant coach in Detroit. Ray Scott then was picked to succeed Earl Lloyd. Earl ended up getting fired by general manager Ed Coyle. But long story short, Ray Scott was great. He ended up being coach of the year. He took that Pistons team to the playoffs. They played Chicago in the opening round, and back then it was a 7-game opening round series. I think things changed after that. As we know, the NBA went to a best out of 3, or they experimented best out of 5. But that Detroit-Chicago series, Jacob and Scott, was terrific. 7 games, all games were fought back and forth. Pistons, I think, won 1 or 2 in Chicago. Chicago won 1 or 2 in Detroit. Then it went down to a game 7, and obviously the Bulls came out on top. But all that being said, yeah, it was, the fans were going crazy. The media loved it. It was just a hard-nosed, like you said, knock it down series.
Right.
And I tell you what, Sloan was just epitomized of the Chicago Bulls of that era. They were tough. They were tough to beat. They were gritty. And they had some great guys, like you said, Van Leer, and of course, Butterbean Love, and Dick Motta was their coach. But yeah, no, my recollection, I can't remember actually sitting there, but I did go to a couple of those playoff games. My mind escapes me, other than the fact that I know every game was, like I said, edge of seat.
Well, go ahead, Scott.
Well, when you compare Detroit and Chicago, you do it many ways. Number one, you have Lake Michigan. You got the second city and Michigan Avenue. I mean, my goodness, if there's 2 cities that are brother cities, it's definitely Detroit and Chicago. I know I've been to Chicago many, many times, and I know how intense that rivalry can become amongst all the 4 major sports. But yeah, Dick Motta, there were a lot of great players on that Chicago team. I wasn't Curtis Rowe, John Mengelt, Dave Bing, Bob Lanier, just to name a few, Curtis Rowe. They had a lot of good players on both ends. It was a little series where you hated to see one lose, but back then you had a 7-game series from the outset, and and Chicago advanced. And I think the Milwaukee Bucks, weren't they all in the Western Conference back at the time?
Yes, too? Right. It was called the Western Conference Semifinals, Detroit and Chicago. Right. Yeah, that round.
That's what I thought.
And you know what? And you know what, guys? Chicago Stadium, of course, had it over Cobo Arena. Okay, Chicago Stadium, the old Chicago Stadium. We know what a barn that was and how noisy and crazy those fans were. Well, Detroit. Now, this stadium only held 11,000. It's called Cobo Arena, named after a former mayor of Detroit. It since has turned into a conference center. But the Pistons played there for many, many years, and they drew some lousy crowds. But that season, they drew a lot of sellout crowds, as you guys, at Scott and I will remember.
Yeah,
Cobo was big with wrestling.
Oh,
yeah. I remember. I've been to Chicago Stadium once. It was neat. It reminded me a lot of Olympia Stadium. Yeah, Cobo was also big for the roller derby too, Jacob. I got to admit, back then it was fun to watch wrestling in the roller derby. Now, what do you have?
Well, wrestling, just to say a little off the thing, so this wrestling is now, I call it, it's a marvel. It's a Marvel movie inside of a ring. Everything that flies. There's not a lot of selling. You don't think it's a fight. But here's one of the things. You bring up Jerry Sloan for a second. You brought this up, Scott. He was like 14 points a game. It wasn't huge on the offense, but he was kind of the grinder, the tough guy. But you want to know something, though? This is what the NBA truly misses with not only the people in the league, but the teams in general. Right. Remember a few weeks ago when I brought up that it's like before Ben Simmons took another year off or whatever the heck he did. I was saying, okay, don't let him score. Just let him facilitate the ball. He had 7 assists in 13 in his last game. 7 assists in 13 minutes. Just let him facilitate the ball and get rebounds. It's that role player. We are bringing. It's like, of course, it ain't going to happen with Ben Simmons because he doesn't have the mindset or mental to do it. But I'm just saying, anybody and everybody, because of the media and because of fantasy and because of ESPN and because of Stephen A. and you get mocked if you don't score and doing all that stuff, you don't have that Jerry Sloan type. You don't have that. It's like you have too many pundits, which is why I call myself the pundit's pundit. You have too many pundits saying, what's wrong with him? He's only 14 points a game this year. What's wrong with having that on your team and just getting it constant? I mean, we just dealt with the women's final where they had a bunch of those kind of players, Iowa and LSU, where both sides had a bunch of those type of players.
Well, defense is a foreign language these days, and that's why the game is going south, Jacob. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I remember when George and I covered the Bad Boys, for crying out loud, and games were in the 90s and the 80s, and if on a good night, you might hit 100 points. So, I don't care about the new NBA collective bargaining agreement, load management, if you miss it, and that doesn't matter. When the ratings go down like that, okay, and people don't watch it, which I don't do a lot of basketball stuff, except when I have a great guest like Mike Jarvis on the Sports Exchange yesterday for a different reason, then you know what? To me, it's just a different situation altogether. Defense is a foreign language. The guys like Bobby Jones, the guys like Dennis Rodman, Jerry Sloan, and the list goes on and on, to me, are ones that you really do miss. I mean, defense wins championship games in every sport, but this one. Well, it really does when you think about it, because now everybody's so busy trying to go out there. Pardon me?
Roles win championships. It's like this is where it's this way in basketball. It's this way in football. It's every sport we're having it right now. Too many pundits. What's wrong with that guy? Simply a role. You need people to do their thing. So you have. If you're a strong scorer, why do you need 4 other strong scorers and doing all that kind of stuff? Why can't you have the facilitator? Why can't you have the grinding defense?
That's right. I mean, that's right.
That is why when you have this is the thing. That's why when you have a team like the Warriors, for instance, they have 4 NBA titles, but in between some really bad years. And it's like, that's why you don't keep the consistency, because it's all in the same. Someone either gets hurt, or guess what? When you're shooting threes, you have a great year and then you have a bad next year. There's not a consistency to anything.
Yeah, rules do, but you know what, Jacob? Really, defense does. Now, let me tell you, guy. Now, I'll tell you one guy that could play in any era would be Draymond Green, because you love his intensity, his rebounding, and the fact
and
that
his right hook.
Well, that doesn't hurt either. Ask Jordan Poole what his right hook looks like.
Michigan Stater.
Yeah, but the point that I'm saying is he could play in any era. Whether you're getting technical fouls, playing defense, you take a guy out of him and they can't play defense, all of a sudden you have a shootout that's going to go 170, 190 points, and you're going to lose half your audience, and it's going to go back to, well, I'll just watch it for the last final 2 minutes, and nobody cares about the other 46, basically. Is that what it comes down to?
Yeah.
So
Well,
I agree.
Yeah.
The role players are very important in basketball, and they've gotten so far away from that nowadays.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, and that is true, we are going to the next topic, by the way. We're going to the next topic. It's a Basketbros moment in time. 1958. Scott, you turned about 50 that year, right? No.
No.
No. And I was just, yeah, I
don't.
I have to have a little fun with both of you. It's a NBA Finals Game 6. Bob Pettit ties the NBA record, 50 points to hand the Hawks the first and only NBA title. And it's St. Louis in the St. Louis years. Now, this is the thing about Bob Pettit. It's like when I look at Bob Pettit and I look at that hairline, then I just wonder why doesn't Kevin Durant just go along with it? Either shave his head or go along with that look, because they did that for so many years. Why just give up? But I'll tell you this. He was I can say this right now. I don't say he's quite the passer, but he was sort of built like that era's Jokic. He was maybe a little less fat, maybe a little less body fat, but he was a beast for his day. Just to show how wide the shoulders were, because remember, everybody else was like 175, 180. Everybody else in that kind of deal. He was the beast for the day. I mean, guy was about 6'9", and he had good hands, and he had rebounds, and there's all that kind of stuff like that. And 50 points that give the only NBA title. He's going to still be remembered forever because of that, until the Atlanta Hawks figure that out. So I was going to ask you this, Scott. What do you think of that one?
Well, I think Bob Pettit was like you say, there's a reason why he's a legendary player. He puts up 50 points to hand the Hawks a championship. How many people really knew the Hawks resided in St. Louis any more than the Braves, resided once upon a time in Milwaukee? You think about it, he was one of those kinds of guys that 50 points then probably could have been 80 now, right? Don't you think? I mean,
100.
Yeah, 80 to, I'm trying to be conservative and nice about it, but yeah, I mean, 50 points and 58, really?
Yeah.
And you think of what the rule changes are now. I mean, everybody, again, you get to play patty cake bakers, man, no hitting. Otherwise, they'll go ahead and slap you with a technical. And even if you hit somebody on the wrist, technical, and we'll call it a flagrant one if you slap somebody on the wrist, but not Pettit, but that's just a different era. I actually was born in 62, but nevertheless, I knew enough about Bob Pettit. Well, no, that's at least you have the senior citizens AARP group on tonight here on Basketbros. That's for sure.
Hey, why not, right?
You got to give AARP their little props, but they more power to them. Ties 50 points back then. Oh my God!
Yeah.
What this reminds me of a little bit? It reminds me when Dan Marino once upon a time held the all-time passing record of 60,000 change. You wonder if that record would ever be broken. And all of a sudden, he's probably 8th or 10th on the list because they've changed the rules once again in the NFL for more offense. And this is exactly what this reminds me of, when you think about it. 50 points now versus what it was valued then. It reminds me of what gas prices were many years ago when we were complaining about 75 cents, George, to $1. And now what do they have? Like $3.50 nationally.
It's going to go up again because of the oil. But it's like,
yeah.
Remember Neil Lomax, by the way, with 4,000 yards in 1984, which that's literally insane for that time, considering at that time you practically molested the wide receiver. You practically tackled them. You got away with so much. Now you can't sneeze on them. So they're good those.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So the reality of the situation is, we all have to acclimate to the times, whether we like it or not. Jacob and George, that's really what it comes down to. And 50 points isn't valued. It's like, some of these guys are getting 40 points and a half, 35 points and a half.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the thing is that he only played 10 seasons from 55 to 65. I looked it up. He only shot 43, almost 44%, yet he averaged 26 points a game. So, I mean, he wasn't even a 50% shooter, which I found is amazing looking up Pettit's stats. But he's in the Hall of Fame. He had a Hall of Fame career, no question about it, with the Hawks. And you're right, Scott. You know, it seems weird having the Hawks win a title in St. Louis, but that's okay. You know, at least they won one. Of course, we know they won nothing down in Atlanta,
How do I know
unfortunately.
this? How I know
But
this?
Bob Pettit, yeah, he's one of those guys, certainly a Hall of Famer, but I was just kind of taken aback. But like you said, Jacob, you know, he averaged a ton of rebounds too per game. He was an all-around player. So even though he was shooting 44% maybe from the field, he was hauling down 15, 16 boards also. So, I mean, you know, he was definitely an all-around player. But what a great moment in history. You're right. Absolutely. I mean, to win your first title and to hand it in with a 50-point performance is just incredible.
Well, don't lose sight of one thing. He didn't have the 3-point shot either. Then it was all
true, very true.
The only 3-point play was the one that you drive to the basket and all of a sudden get the foul shot. And now you got the 3-point shot, which gets you 50 a whole lot faster, is what it does.
Yeah, yeah.
It depends on how hot you are. You're correct. But
so he would have played in Detroit when I was a young lad. Okay, Jacob.
So when you were a young lad.
I was a young lad. I was born in 56. I do not recall ever seeing him at Cobo Arena because I really didn't follow the Pistons probably until about 1969, 70, that time frame.
Oh, and I'll tell you this. All these jokes, like the old man jokes and everything like that, I'm about 2 years away from getting that from everybody when we get new people on sideline. So I'm already I'm going to get it with the gray hairs anyway.
Yeah, that until George and I came, and now we're deflecting some of those old man jokes on you, and we're the ones. Hey, you know, it's kind of interesting. I married into a family where, you know, I'm the oldest of everybody when it comes to my wife. We got 8 of us, and I'm at the top of the food chain here. You know, is what I am. I got myself, Candy, and then the rest of the group. So I'm numero uno, and we have, you know, I'm 1 out of 8, and I'm sitting at the top.
Yeah. Well, one guy who's not that old just contributed, and Will Vogel, thank you for being part of our show.
Absolutely.
Pettit won a lot of All-Star MVPs. Thank you, Will, for that information.
And bringing up the 44%, you know what that means? That means that he took a ton of shots. That means they gave it to him all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, because if you're scoring as much as he did and keeping the and I'll bet you this, a lot of if he had 15, 16 rebounds a game in some of those years, that means he's getting a lot of his misses and putbacks.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. All around great player.
I mean, Will Vogel's research tendencies tend to make him a little bit older. So he probably puts on a little bit of a mask thinking he's a little bit older, but he's figured out how to use Google and then some. That's why he.
Well, but no. We'll put some gray hair on him. He can be our age.
Yeah. I can only imagine what that dynamic would look like, but all right.
Well, I'm going to say, and let's go on to the next one. This is a fun one, but let's go on to the next one here for the topic for a second, because we went a little long in the last one. Moment in time, 1997 Western Conference Finals, Game 6. And remember, we brought up Utah being in the Western Conference Final 5 times, you know, and stuff like that. Game 6, Stockton stuns Houston with the last-second shot to propel Jazz to the first NBA Finals. And I can tell you right now, Denzel was so happy. He was so happy at that game, I can already tell.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was happy too, because let me tell you this. Jerry Sloan, you talk about the Utah Jazz head coach, and you talk about the 2 superstars he built that team around, obviously Stockton and Karl Malone. I mean, you know, let's face it, guys, they had some fantastic years. They had some great years. And I mean, if anybody I wanted in the West to win it all, it was Utah. I mean, I followed them and I kind of rooted for them. They had more of a multi-dimensional team. And obviously they're led by 2 superstars. But yeah, I remember that. I remember watching that. Scott, do you think that was on CBS or was that over on NBC?
I thought it was NBC, wasn't it?
It was
NBC, 97? Yeah. Sure. Okay.
In fact, I saw a couple of Utah Jazz games when it was on my monster trip over to Salt Palace. It was unreal.
That's right. You did.
Yeah, I took a long trip, Jacob, over 30 days, put 10,000 miles on a rental car and picked up a lot.
Was there any acid involved?
No, actually, I did pretty good. I had to rely on a CV radio. I didn't have a cell phone at the time and payphones on the road. So go.
Yeah,
figure.
but I mean, Stockton was tremendous. That was an unbelievable game. I mean, 1997, and like Scott and I were in our prime covering the Pistons and other teams around the league at that time. Oh, yeah. Denzel.
Yeah, I don't think he was too thrilled about that one, but oh well.
Oh boy, no, but no. The biggest thing about it was this is the deal with Stockton, though. It's the fact that right now we are dealing with politics and idiots online. Oh, he wasn't that great. We have so many better point guards. No one plays point guard anymore. No one plays point guard. It is a merger between a shooting and point guard. Like Steph, I'm going to say it forever. Steph Curry's the all-time great shooter. He is not a point guard. He is not in that same boat as someone like 15,000 assists for John Stockton. All those steals, number one steals, number one assists, all that kind of. I mean, the thing was, there was a thing where Chris Webber was on the bus with a rookie, and they saw this guy coming out of a minivan with a bunch of kids with his wife. That's the baddest man in the NBA, and everybody's starting to laugh. Then they realize it was John Stockton. and it's like, no, that's the realization of things. Like people even forgot about him over in as a dream teamer. He would walk across the thing and no one knew who he was. But I think that's probably how he would liked it. But we're living in a world where everything has to be politics, and you have to agree with me or I don't like you. So they're trying to shut down John Stockton, but he's still the all-time great. As far as he's still the all-time great. All those assists, all those steals, he was the quarterback on that. And then also, about 16 of the 20 years with 82 games straight.
Well, the only thing I'm surprised with John Stockton is why he hasn't pursued a head coaching opportunity.
He'd be a good one.
Yeah, I think he would. I mean, you talk about
that's true, Scott.
A true point guard who could definitely, quarterback a team on the court. And then you would think, I mean, I got to tell you, Steve Nash wasn't that bad. I think anybody could have gone out there and failed over in Brooklyn with that dysfunctional mess called Edge of Night, Brooklyn style, because it wasn't one life to live. And the only one that would have ended up in General Hospital would have been all the fans inside of there. And if I'm missing any other ones, well, so
I'll tell you that series was young and a restless.
Yeah, no, that's true.
10 times he was an All-Star. 9 times he was the assist champion. 11 times All NBA. What a great guy! Like you said, though, it's so true, Jacob. He was a true point guard.
Yeah, I mean, true. And the last
6'1",
right now,
6'1", 170. Hey, listen, he trust me, he was a thorn in the Pistons side when Scott and I were covering a lot of Piston games. Let me tell you, John Stockton.
Well, let me say this, though. I hope Steve Nash does get another head coaching opportunity, because I don't really think you could judge him based on the drama he had to put up with. I really.
Well, he won games. He still won games anyway.
He won games despite that mess. So, give him a group that'll at least listen to you, and because it's not like he's a bad player. And I hope John Stockton eventually comes around and maybe wants to
send him to Orlando. Send him to Orlando or something. You know what I'm saying? Just something along those lines. To a team that's just really, really bad, doesn't seem to have a hope. Get him to somebody he could be a teacher a little bit and start building a team.
Yeah, but you know what though? I'd say no to Orlando. And when I had Mike Jarvis on there, I asked him the question about Patrick Ewing. And he does believe that Patrick Ewing is going to land up in the NBA again. He'll carefully make his move. And I think at some point, you may think I'm nuts, but listen to me. Hear me out, okay? I'm talking to Coach Jarvis at this point. I still think Patrick Ewing should get an NBA head coaching job on the line.
He was terrible at Georgetown, though.
Well, big deal. When you had that mess over there called a train wreck with John Thompson III, it's not like he inherited a real mixed bag there either. It's not like when John Beeline left that Juwan Howard had some players. I mean, Patrick Ewing,
the thing
got
is,
handed sawdust.
Yeah, but Scott, don't you think that it's switching to Ewing's? I think maybe a couple years as an assistant before he gets into a head coaching job.
Well, that's what Mike Jarvis said. That's what Coach Jarvis said. He doesn't think he'll get a head coaching job right away. He'll get back in the NBA game 1 or 2 years and then gets an opportunity. I'm just disappointed he hasn't gotten an NBA shot. Now, But no, you're right. But no, you know what, Jacob, say what you want about the Georgetown, but that situation has been dysfunctional. And the same since John Thompson, the original John Thompson left in the first place. You're talking about going into big shoes. It's a different story. And, Patrick Ewing did the best he could. I'm not saying he wasn't responsible for part of their problems, but you can't put the entire blame on him because that program hasn't been relevant in a while.
Well, and by the way, Denzel, I know you're watching. You don't have to do this. You don't have to switch anything up because I got my own topic because we went a little onto the thing, we went a little long on one and a couple shorts. I want to bring a topic that I was going to talk about tonight. Greg Popovich, he had said they were asking him a question about what about what he, at the end of his career, at the end of his coaching career, what he was thinking and what he liked about it. And you know what he said? He said he didn't know how much he would like being a coach for kids, that do not know. And even though they're losing, they're trying to learn how to win. But it's a new skill for him. He feels like it's a new skill and it's teaching him something. And even though he's going to retire soon, you have to wonder. I'm just going to ask you this question. Knowing that he's got this thought process, do you think he'll fully retire? Or do you think he'll go on to college or do some kind of consultant work or something along those lines now that he's gotten kind of a new, oh, thank you very much. I didn't even realize he had the thing. But no, you have to wonder, do you think he'll go consult or do you think he has a new lifespan with the coaching now that he found this?
I think there is a potential, guys. I really do. I mean, because of that, like you said, the statement about this is something different, this is something new, coaching kids and coaching them up, and let's face it, coaching a losing team. It's a new wrinkle, let's say, in his trick of bags, and very well could carry on. I'm not sure if it'll be in the NBA level, could be in the college level, or he could do some scouting, maybe perhaps for the Spurs or another organization, or even something in the league office. But Greg Popovich has just been great, and congratulations to him and all those outstanding players that were named to the Hall of Fame class that's going to be inducted in August in the Naismith Hall of Fame. But it's interesting. Yeah, I think so. I think he's got this now in his playbook, and he's coaching kids, and he's found out that there's certain things that he can do to help them. Sure, he'll carry that on somewhere. Scott?
So let me reference my interview with Jarvis again and also relate it to Popovich, okay? I asked Coach Jarvis this the other day, would you ever consider going back into coaching? Man's in his 70s, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. He says, I wouldn't mind being a top assistant to help the head coach out a little bit and be his earpiece on the sidelines and advising him that way. You want examples? What about Phil Martelli with Juwan Howard? There's one. Let's talk about another one. What about Larry Brown with Penny Hardaway? And I could see a guy like Popovich. I don't know whether he would go back to college after all these years in the NBA. I would struggle with it, but I don't think he wants to leave the Spurs in such disarray. I think, when you have an opportunity to say, okay, I know how good it's been, right? Let me see if I can take this thing and turn it around on my own and not leave the cupboard bare for my successor. And I still think to this day that successor should be Becky Hammond.
I'm absolutely with that. Yeah. I've been saying it forever. I've been saying it forever. And there was a thing. They were talking about. Dawn Staley was saying that she doesn't want to coach men, that she wants to keep coaching the women, which is fine because there's no way that a first woman should do it without it being Becky Hammond first. She coached men. She coached the summer league.
No, that's it. And she won it during the summer league. She won a championship there. So I think Becky should be the next coach of the Spurs. But getting back to your original question about Popovich, I don't think he wants to leave the Spurs in a year or two if he's liking this challenge of coaching young guys here to see what they can do to reach their potential. There's a little something to say about why older guys, even in the college rank, will go ahead and stay on longer, because as long as they don't lose younger kids in the locker room, which you won't, because obviously they can take away their scholarship if they want to anyhow. And whereas, you're getting paid in the NBA, why not go 1 or 2 years? If he leaves that franchise with his final year winning at least 30 games and they've only won 20 or whatever, 30, 35 games, that to me is just as impressive, knowing that you stood there when the going got tough, especially when you peaked and you won a handful of championships. So I could see him hanging around a year or two, but I ultimately think Becky Hammond should be the one.
Well, one of the things that I have a thought process of with Popovich is I completely get him, because I've been a coach before, like for volunteer, and and plus the fact I love mentoring. I've done this before. I love tutoring and mentoring. I've been a basketball coach. The one thing I've always said, I actually tried getting in, and I'm not going to say what the school was, but I tried to get in on a school that had winless record, was like 37 straight losses. End up like 42 before they finally won a game. But I'm like, I was trying to get on that. I don't think it would have happened, but that's the type I want.
Right.
Because that's the type I want, because, and the ones that have zero hope, that the team is, that the players try to play hard, but they're way outmatched. I like that challenge.
Yeah, that is a challenge. And that's good that you did that, Jacob.
Well, I would have loved to have done it. It's like they found somebody. They obviously found somebody with a. They obviously found somebody.
Yeah, but you had the desire to do it.
Yeah, I had the desire to do it.
I think we talk about these guys like John Beeline took the Pistons job as an assistant.
Right.
Obviously, it didn't work out in Cleveland, but Johnny Beeline, what a great job at U of M. He's another one that when Scott was mentioning those names, right. And again, he's with an older guy, Dwayne Casey. I know that. But if Beeline does not get the head coaching job in Detroit, hopefully he'll stay on the staff, I'm hoping, if indeed they brew him Casey. That's another subject for another day. But I agree with you. Popovich does have so much to add to the game. And like you said, guys, I hope he does stay on with the Spurs.
Well, since you're going to bring up Beeline, what I hope happens there is, should they decide to move on from Casey, that whoever the new coach is brings on Beeline as a top assistant.
Yes, I agree, Scott.
But that's a TBD waiting to happen, and I'm sure that before long, there'll be some answers on it that we can address down the line on this particular show, as well as some of the ones we have on our network.
And for what I was talking about, I mean, this is my thing that I love. I love the idea. That's my actual dream, to be able to try to build something from the absolute dirt, to do that. And I should say, I would like to see other coaches act like that, because here's the truth with that. If you're going to say at a high school that is in that death and everything like that, you're going to get all the time in the world to fix it. You're not going to be dealing with the parents are not that big of a pain in the butt. They're not going to. They're worried about their kids' schooling. The team isn't supposed to be that good. You can take your time. You can be able to take your time and build the thing. But there's a school. There was a city, Palmyra, Missouri. Excuse me, Palmyra, Missouri, is dealing with a horrible coaching issue, and then it's like one guy resigned. Then he was a football coach. His replacement resigned. Then they found all kinds of homophobic and racist texts and all that kind of stuff like that, and everything. It was a disastrous mess. They found all that, and all of it started because there was a war, because there were parents that just wanted to see their kids, the little Johnny, get more playing time. And it's like, and it's like all of it started there, and then it just became an absolute unmitigated mess. And then because of certain things, they lost. They went 6-4, now they ended up 0-10 because they had some violations. So now that's a start over. See, here's the thing. Now you got an 0-10. This is the football team. Now you've got an 0-10. You got to replace the coach, and now there's a reputation of parents that won't shut up. And it's like you want, and it's like because they've won in the past.
Right.
So that's the thing. Why not go to a team that doesn't have that thing? Let them trust you.
Yeah.
Let them trust you and get to that thing and dig, because at some point, though, because you already know when the parents become a problem, the kids become spoiled.
Oh, right? Yeah. And it's so true. I mean, we've got a local school here in Detroit, Michigan, that used to be a powerhouse in football. I'm not going to mention their name, but they have gone on hard times, just like you said, firing coaches. The kids used to come to the school. It was kind of like a magnet for football. And I agree with you. Then the parents got involved, and all kinds of crazy crap happened. So, it's a tough road, but sometimes starting out, like you said at the bottom, at least if you're a coach and build on that, build that program up, get it to back to.
Well, you're building yourself in the
semblance.
community instead of the community judging you.
Right.
It's
right.
like,
Well, I mean, if you're going to go there, you might as well just look right down the road from me, 10 minutes. What has happened at Florida Atlantic University? Dusty May took a job that was considered committing reputational career suicide.
That would be a job I'd want myself. I don't care.
Well, yeah, no, not if you look. Not if you looked at the facilities that Coach Jarvis had to deal with and everything like that. Yeah. It took a hurricane just to get insurance money to even make it somewhat decent, as George sent me in that article. But then you also look at the hard times in Metro Detroit. Farmington Hills Harrison was a big school, and all of a sudden the school closed down. So I'm well aware of that too. Yeah. So, you know, it depends on the situation. But when you talk about, you know, you'd like to think that everything's close knit. And, you know, I think FAU's basketball story should be something to think about down the road, but you just never know the circumstances that are what they are. You really don't know. And, you know, I've been in that arena, or whatever you want to call it, 3,000 seat. And to me, you know what, it's one thing to have 500 to 1,000 saying FAU when you think it's a morgue, when it should have 3,000. And I know I've been referencing my interview a lot with Coach Jarvis a little bit today, but everything we're talking about this show is very pertinent to what you guys are talking about. It really, really is.
Yeah.
And yeah, you'd like to think that you have the community thing, you know what I mean, that will rally, but it doesn't always happen that way. Did anybody know anything about Boca Raton until recently, until FAU got them on the map? They're only a mile and a half away from the stadium. Not really. The only thing everybody knows about Boca Raton is it's a high class tourist town in South Florida, which is comparable to Scottsdale in Arizona and La Jolla outside of San Diego. Nobody realized there was a whole lot of athletics in this area, and I'm hoping they build on that.
Yeah, well, one of the things I was bringing up with the community and stuff like that is what I meant. It's like when you're in a team that's already won, they have an expectation. It's hard to be able to do that because you're getting judgments immediately. But what I'm saying is when you get a team that is in the death throes of hell, and then you get a chance to build yourself in the community as long as you stay long enough and you get to that thing. There is going to be there's judgments when the team's won in the past. That's what I was talking about. And there's judgments when there's that, okay, you weren't like this guy, you weren't like that guy. But when there's a death throes of do what Dusty May did, and then you build something, you're building. I'm from a small town, like I said, 40,000 people. It's like, would I take hypothetically, would I take a Quincy job of any? No, because you're talking 62 regional titles. I mean, it's like 34 sectionals, some absurd number. I mean, they got two state titles, but it's not the point. They're always there. It's like if someone like me, if I became a big time winner and then I build on it, sure. But to start like that, oh my God.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
But you know what? The amazing part about it is, Jacob, I love where I live now, and I won't ever leave here unless I'm no longer with us, period. But if I didn't live where I was at, I would love to live in a small town, a close-knit, and see if I can make an impact on the community.
Absolutely.
We know it'll never happen, obviously, because I'm not leaving
here.
No, but the whole idea, your point carries a lot of weight, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
It really does. If you went in a small town, then they figure they'll give you the key to the city, elect a mayor, anything else they can do. Every time you walk in a high-class restaurant here, how do you want your steak cooked? Oh, well done. There you go on the house. You know, that kind of
yeah, they already know.
The old Hoosiers type of thing that you're looking at. You know, you either look great or you look bad, and that's where I'm going.
True, very true, Scott.
Oh, well, we're going to go to the final topic.
Okay.
We're going to go to the final topic because we've got a good show tonight. I've loved this.
Yes,
this has been very nice. We're good. This is going to be a testing here. Picking your dream NCAA basketball national championship game, any team, any era, and final score. I'm going to start with this one. UCLA versus Indiana State. I'm going to pick the UCLA Bill Walton years versus Indiana State, 1979. And I'm going to say this now just because here's the thing with that Michigan State game. That was a more up-tempo game. John Wooden, as you know, was a ball movement, just like Bird and Bill Hodges in Indiana State was. I think that's a 2 to 4 point game. UCLA wins. I'll say like 68-64 or something. It would be along those lines. UCLA wins, but I think UCLA teams and the Birds Indiana State team were closer to the same style. So as far as, because like I said, the one thing about Indiana State and Michigan State is they were up tempo versus ball movement and slow down. So it's like if Michigan State goes hard, then it's like they get to held the ball and have a lower score, but Michigan State had a great night. Where UCLA, that'd be a close game because they're both the same style. So I'm just going to go with that right there. So you pick it. So you pick, George.
Well, it shouldn't come as any surprise to people that live in my state. I always would like to know, how would Magic Johnson and Judd Heathcote's team that you just mentioned against Indiana State, up tempo, how would they fare? Are you ready, Scott?
Yeah.
Against the Fab Five of Steve Fisher. I would love to see that
Would be beautiful.
in an era that was so different than it is today. But the Fab Five with all Juwan Howard and Rose and all of them against Magic Johnson and Judd Heathcote's boys. Oh God, that would be a great game. Talk about up tempo. Oh my God, that score might be 110 to 105 or something.
Real quickly,
I always thought about that being, again, born and raised in Michigan.
No, real quickly before Scott gets there, this is not a national title team, but I'm going to say this. Loyola Marymount 1990 versus Michigan State. Both up tempo, both everything.
Oh, yeah.
That would be beautiful.
Well,
Scott, what do you got?
Let me say this to Will Vogel. Okay, Mr. Vogel. NBA,
Oh, yeah.
I know you're not, that you're envious of a lot of the things I try to do, but I was at the 1982 Final Four as a fan when Georgetown and North Carolina, and that was the most unbelievable Final Four you'll ever see, when obviously North Carolina emerged. And to me, Dean Smith won his first title against Patrick Ewing. So with that said, you know what? Yeah, I'd love to be able to sit here and tell you right now that Indiana State and Michigan State was my favorite game of all time because it changed the fortunes in the NBA. But now that I'm really kind of backed into this corner here, me personally, I would love to have seen Patrick Ewing take on Akeem Olajuwon in a final.
Oh, nice.
Yes, good one.
Think about Patrick Ewing taking on Akeem Olajuwon in a final.
Oh, wow. It's like, no question on that. It's like, and that's the thing about Houston. That's the thing about Houston. I've always said with something like that. Houston and Virginia, unfortunate part that they both had some choke jobs. Especially
remember, I think in one regular season game, they made it happen with Virginia and Ralph Sampson against Patrick Ewing.
Yes, remember that?
I think Sampson won the game, but Ewing had a far better career. And it's a shame that what happened to Ralph as the guy subsequently, got hurt.
Bless you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, you guys are stating the obvious one, so I had to think outside the box since I was last. But to me, Ewing against Olajuwon, two of the best pure centers in basketball. And if you add the fact that I believe Clyde Drexler was on that team, there was an interesting situation altogether. So I have to go that route. But yeah, 1982 at the New Orleans Superdome, 60,000 plus. That was, I think, the first game they ever played in the dome. Other than that, after that, everything was in regular basketball stadium. But
right. Now it's always a dome.
Right. Now I'll always say that, to me, my favorite game was the Michigan State, Indiana State game for sure. But you wonder what ifs. What about the 1989 Michigan team that won it all against anybody, for that matter? Steve Fisher went ahead and coached. I mean, that took over for Bill Frieder. They won the whole thing. I mean, you can pair them up with anybody. It would be pretty interesting, I think.
Well, I want to say this. We have about 7 minutes because I want to do the 56 minute. I don't do the producing thing too often, so I want to be able to get this. I want to ask you folks this. We had the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, this time around. I'll tell you a couple little details they had said. Number one, they had said that the players can now have a piece of an NBA or WNBA team while they're still playing. Like, they can be owners. And then they can also, and I was going to say another thing is, I believe from what I can say, thank you, Will. It's like one of the things you can also get in with the marijuana. So it's like it's such a different world now. But I want to say this: you wake up in the morning and you have one thing that you get on your like on your email, and they're saying that you need to add one thing. Is there anything specific that you would add to the CBA? Either of you?
Yeah, I would actually. I think that the minimum qualification for the award should be 60 games, not 65. I do.
Okay.
In fact, I'd even go as low as 55 the way these guys are taking days off.
Oh, I see. Well, you go for an MVP or?
Yeah, or any individual awards. I don't know. I don't know if they really address this load management as much as you want to think that they did. I'm not happy with it at all. No. I think that, as Rick Curdy would say, that he doesn't like Adam Silver. I've always been a David Stern guy. And to me, Adam Silver is the biggest kiss, you know what, commissioner I've ever seen. I don't like him, to be honest with you. But load management, 20 games out of what, 80 out of 80. This playing tournament to me is a gimmick, is what it is. I mean, the in-season tournament, I didn't mind the playing. I don't like anything that the NBA is doing, to be honest with you. So I think they got off easy. I can't believe that they didn't at least make the requirement 60 games to get awards. That's what I think.
One thing I would like to do, I would like to see the return of the NBA doubleheaders. Back in the day in Detroit, we would host the New York Knickerbockers in game 2. But before that, we had the Hawks, you know, against the Bulls or whatever it was. You know, it was just a little bit different. And I know it'll probably never happen because nobody wants to surrender their home gate. But it would be great to have NBA doubleheaders at some of the famous arenas around the country, such as LA, Staples Center, and of course, Madison Square Garden and the new Chicago Stadium. I mean, it would be great to just have a sprinkling of doubleheaders back in the NBA, and both of them nationally televised, of course, by either TNT, ESPN, ABC, whoever.
You want to know what I would want to do? What I want to do big time? The one thing that I do miss from the older times, Boston going to Hartford a couple times a year. Give them. See, I know you're giving up the Boston Garden number, or what is it now? It's not the Fleet Center, but whatever the arena is now. Whatever you're giving up there, the 2 home games. But I like the idea of Detroit going to, say, Fort Wayne, hypothetically, you know, just for a couple games. Yep. Of the Boston going to Hartford. Of, you know, just maybe if some team. But what if Chicago went to Kansas City and gave a couple? I like the idea of the NBA teams that don't, you know, NBA cities that don't normally have a team that they go to a city that does not. You know, gives them a couple of games a year. Gives them a couple of games a year.
You know, and Vancouver's another one. We used to have a team in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Or Toronto could maybe play a game or 2 in Vancouver.
Well, and if you're going to go that far, what I would do, in fact, I like your idea of Boston going to Hartford. They did that. Why don't you go out there and have the Charlotte Hornets go out to the Dean Smith Dome and let them play up there for a couple games? What's the difference? Well, you know, a couple hour. I'm just using that as an example because it's a couple hour drive up off, I believe, I-85. But no, I agree. Non-NBA cities, give them 1 or 2 games. They go overseas to Europe to do it anyway.
Yeah,
games. They might as well do it locally.
Well, why not do that? And then you're getting. See, the thing is, you know, the stadium will fill. They don't get NBA team. That's the thing. See, that is the thing we don't get when we don't have a circus. Like, we don't have many circuses anymore. We don't have traveling shows anymore. See, you used to go to a place that it'd fill up and then it'd move on. See, that's what it used to have. Because everything is online, there's not that much anymore. The thing is, you know darn good and well that these cities would fill the stadium, regardless if the team's good or bad.
Yes.
What if you get – and it's like, I'm thinking this, and in cities that don't have it, because you're not guaranteed LeBron to play. You're not guaranteed KD to play because they play the load management garbage. Yeah. But just the idea that it's an NBA team in a non-NBA city where you can fill the stadium and you can fill the stadium and get a possible good game out of it. And you want to know something? It's in a smaller, it might be in a college arena or it might be whatever. The tickets are most likely going to be cheaper.
Well, you know,
I mean, it's funny. I don't want to get too philosophical about it, but I will say one thing, Jacob, you are on point. It's a good idea. I mean, think about it. You don't have any teams in Missouri, St. Louis, or Kansas City. You break down all the different areas. Now, I say one thing about the NBA compared to most sports, though. They do have more teams in one market venues in any team that I'm aware of. For example, Sacramento's the only game in town. Portland's the only game in town. And Portland, in fact, could even play 2 games over in Seattle until they get a new team there. I mean, or Vancouver.
San Antonio's the only game in town.
Right. So the NBA has gone to some of those markets. They have a salary cap, thankfully, there. So yeah, I'm with you. I mean, why not? I mean, but this load management's a joke. I am so surprised that they didn't make it any more than that. I am. But Jacob, you are on point. I enjoyed watching the Celtics play at the Hartford Civic Center. You ever been there before?
I remember. Have not.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, years ago when I was up in New England doing my running around up there, I saw the Ice Capades over at the Hartford Civic Arena, and that's over in a mall. So they call it the Stadium in a Mall, where the Hartford Whalers used to be. It was pretty cool. You walk in the mall, all of a sudden, boom, there's a stadium in there. I bought tickets to go to the Ice Capades. It was pretty cool stuff. So, go to the mall, go to a game, beautiful thing, Hartford.
Yeah. Well, the game would be cheaper knowing it's not an NBA city. It would be cheaper than the normal
I don't know,
NBA
would
games.
It? Would it?
Yeah, no, I'm talking by itself because you're probably going to get people trying to get it filled. You're going to get certain tickets that are going to be cheaper than others. Maybe the front row would be that. But as I said, you have an option. You be able to get the thing. It wouldn't be as cheap as, say, a college game, but those are the ideas that I was thinking.
Yeah.
Why not?
For many years, the Detroit Pistons played an exhibition game in Grand Rapids, Michigan. That'd be one that Detroit could go to. You mentioned
they played one in East Lansing too, at Breslin. I went to one of those up at Breslin Center up in East Lansing.
Well, yeah, if you want to take it a step further, the Lions used to play an exhibition game in Ann Arbor once in a while. U of M.
Yeah. Right.
That won't happen again. But anyways, great topic. Great show.
No problem. And that's a great show. And by the way, Scott, tell us where you can find you.
All right. Well, you know what? You want to find out where I'm at? No big deal. Today I'm wearing the Grand Canyon cap, so you can't find me there because the signal's a lot better. But if you want to find me, go to subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. That has all the 9 million shows I have, and some of the ones I'll probably add at some point. It's the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Please subscribe. And our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, as well as a couple of shows I appear on here. Basketbros, Wells, Pundits, Pundit. Great stuff.
Yep. And George.
Detroit Sports Broadcaster is on the air. My book is out there and available. There's a link to it on the South Florida Tribune website, which I write for under the Motor City Tribune. Contribute to a lot of Scott's programs on the network, and happy to be part of Sideline Sports on occasion too. Thank you. You can reach me at geichorn@yahoo.com or on LinkedIn under my name, or else you can also reach me on Twitter at SandGSports99.
And George also was on Pundit Views last Monday night. It was a great interview too. And I'm not going to bring up.
And I've also been on that show. It's incredible.
Yeah, that was wonderful too.
You're doing some great things with it, Jacob.
There's actually a format change I'm thinking of doing in the next few weeks. I'll tell you all about later. I'm not going to bring up everything I'm doing. We'll go over our time. But anyway, I wanted for Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, George Eichorn, I'm Jacob Christner, the Pundit's Pundit. You all have a good night.